presentation. Nat is in all caps, not because I needed to emphasize it, but because the A in this font was kind of unreadable. But also I've gone by another name in the past, and I prefer Nat now. So, yeah. So, let's get started. Okay, this slide is dead serious. If you are physically capable of doing jumping jacks, stand up and give me 20.
Not any stresses or anything.
Come on, Lyle. Alright. That's good enough. That's good enough. Okay, here are the rules of my talk. It's an interactive talk. You're all part of it. You're all giving the talk. So, yeah, you do whatever I say, no matter how crazy it is. You can call me out on being pretentious, and if you do, you get 5 points. If you have good questions, interrupt me. I might not be able to see your hand, so shout something out, and we'll get to your question. If you have something to add, you can also shout out, or whatever. Let's get everyone's input on, because I have some crazy ideas in here, and I want to see where they go when everyone starts thinking about them and connecting them. That's kind of the point of the energy of the talk I want to give. If I offend you, I want you to give, this is kind of like a Wet Willy 2.0, like lick, get a lot of saliva on your hand and give yourself a slap in the face, because you might be offended. Not a lot. Anyway, SMART goals, has anyone had this before in like a business class or whatever, or a design class? So if you're making goals and they're not SMART goals, they're dumb goals. This is actually there's a lot of buzzwords and things you can use to manage your time, but this one actually is really important that when you set goals, they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I could talk for 5 minutes on my experience trying to set different goals and pacing my projects, and it all boils down to those 5 points. So yeah, and I want you to act on one thing that I've said, and remember it. You might want to write it down, whatever you think of, and make your goal, and then act on it at some point. I'm not going to count your points for you. This has never been play tested. We're doing it right now for the first time, and the winner doesn't get anything. So cool. Okay. Practice round. Does everyone remember the rules?
Yes.
They're pretty freeform. So anyway, all right. Which rule does this qualify under?
Pretentious.
It's pretentious. Good. 5 points. Okay. So this is BoJack Horseman. It's offensive, right?
Right. So
Yeah. Okay. If it personally offends you,
I love this show. So
find this episode to be a masterwork of social justice in television. But anyway. There you go. 5 points for asking a question. So when you have questions, or I'm using words that are crazy, or going off on tangents with concepts, stop me and help me clarify things before we go too far. And Space Team's also an awesome game. So yeah.
It's an awesome game.
No more practice. Okay, so a lot of you actually know me and have directly interacted with me, but I have been doing games for approximately 6 years. I sort of taught myself when I was in a programming class in middle school. My dad bought me a book about XNA, and I was really into programming, so I kind of just got myself started and then stuck with it, and here I am. And I wanted to be a writer when I was young, and the way that I kind of stuck with that is that the games that I make are all heavily focused on story and character and soulful human experiences that stick with people and hopefully, change lives or change the world. I don't know. That's pretentious. So, my game, the biggest one, is on Steam. It's The Whisper in Darkness. It's an adaptation of a story by H.P. Lovecraft. It's really short. Anyone here is welcome to a free code to play it on Steam if you want. And I have business cards. This is a little game I made in Pico 8. for the Global Game Jam, so some of you might have seen it there and remember me that way. And yeah, this is what I'm working on next, and we can get to that at some point later. Okay, so I have been gushing passionate thoughts and ideas and crazy nonsense out of my brain ever since I went to New York for the week last week, and just had like the wildest, most inspiring experience of my whole life there, going to museums, looking at amazing art, things that I never thought were possible or that I could see, meeting people. I was able to go to the Game Devs of Color conference while I was there, and there are some people making incredible games who I was able to meet, talk to, make personal connections with. So that, I think, has changed my life forever, and so I'm gushing rainbows. And if anyone remembers this episode of BoJack, they did all the drugs, and now they're writing a book, and it turns out garbage. So I hope I'm not that. And I took a notebook and took 36 pages of notes. A lot of those were for this talk. When I saw that a talk was needed, I was so excited because I've just been feeling awesome, and I want to share that and all of this stuff. And my philosophy on talking and really being a person is that I'm going to be the strongest me that I can, and that's not going to be helpful to everyone. You might listen to this whole thing and think that's all crazy or impossible or stupid or whatever. It just doesn't apply to me or my games or my life or whatever. There are two alternative options for you, and I really want you to do this. Go watch a different talk if you don't like what I'm saying. I don't think it's boring, but whatever. My goal is to, get you thinking about stuff in a way that will shake you up.
That's pretentious.
Thanks. 5 points in your pocket. All right, so yeah, this is my main credential. Is I got a game on Steam, and this was back when Greenlight was a thing, so that means something. But yeah, and it's done pretty well. It hasn't done amazing. I didn't make a profit, but I did earn a good amount of money, and it was a passion project that I didn't expect would ever pay me. So in my mind, it was a success, and the ratings are 85% positive. So people have liked it. So yeah, that's why I feel I have something to share with you. So these are the 4 big points from that Steam release, which are kind of going to guide the flow of this talk. People really like Lovecraft, and that also applies to just a general point, which is designed for a niche audience. I'm designing this talk for a niche audience. That's how you're really going to connect to people. And if you can get someone crazy about what you're doing, or there's no other game that's doing what you're doing, and then they love it, they'll talk about it, that's worth way more than having an ultra-polished thing that, that you would market on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. Make it something that's going to, that's going to shock someone and connect with them, work from the heart. People are protective of the canon of Lovecraft's work, which is, anyway, the whole thing. So I was doing an adaptation, and I did a lot of things to, in my opinion, improve things. And the story this is based on is a public domain story, The Whisperer in Darkness. I think there's so much potential to be adapting classic works. Public domain means it is legally free for you to even, reprint the story exactly as it is. So make it into a game, adapt the text, change it, release a visual novel like I did, or do an adventure game. And that immediately gives an identity to your game that people have read Edgar Allan Poe. Some people love Edgar Allan Poe. Or, any author from before the 30s, you can take their work and make a game, and people will be so into it right off the bat because they're passionate about something. That's easier than trying to make your own world, your own characters, and it also gets you thinking in a way that I found really interesting, is interacting with the past, art from the past, and how does this apply to today? How do I make it better? How do I make it speak to me? Those kinds of things. And also I've been really interested in how to produce games faster, get them out, and not spend forever working on one game that might fail in the market, probably will fail in the market, will fail in the market, be churning things out, constantly getting creative practice, and making money in ways other than Steam and sales and stuff like that. Yeah, you all get this, right? Yeah, there could be.
So now, are you saying like we need other ways of making money? So you're saying that day jobs are necessary, and like I need to be driving Uber or Lyft every now and then? Is that what you're saying?
That's one way. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll get into some others because it even goes beyond that. What I'm going to get into, but that is like number one. The thing that I can tell you that's not dangerous. If I tell you to do that, you're not going to fail and go bankrupt. Some of my other ideas for other ways you can make money might be totally stupid and ruin you. So, disclaimer on those ones, but getting a day job is really recommendable. Yeah. So my takeaway from the first major point is that I'm going to do more Lovecraft stuff, and after that, I'll probably do more public domain classic story stuff. I like working with horror, so maybe some more horror. But when you're working with the past, your mileage may vary because there is an audience that doesn't care about this. My audience probably didn't care about the things that I did to make the story more accepting and modern. But it was important to me, so I did those things to make, not just regurgitate Lovecraft with all of his, I don't know, we don't have to get into it, but yeah. Is that pretentious? Yeah, so then the next thing I came up with, and this also goes back to the other point of making games fast, releasing games fast, is I don't want to have to write all of these things. I don't have all the best ideas. I want to also be doing original stories, not just rehashing and adapting. And so the way to do that was to make an anthology. And so I have a submission page up for the next 5 episodes of Lovecraftian visual novels that I'm paying writers. I've been having good luck specifically talking to visual novel writers. It's been a little bit harder getting traditional writers who are working with like short stories and actual publication. But yeah, so this is my outline, and I think based on the demand, the response to my first game, I think it could be something that requires a lot less effort for me now that I have an engine. I just implement scripts that other people have written and get a guest artist for each one. So I'll be paying contractors and stuff like that, but I expect to actually make a profit. So, and that's a model that I think is worth pursuing, and I'll let you know how it works.
Can you explain anti-Lovecraftian? What does that mean?
Oh, okay. So Lovecraft wrote a lot about aliens, right? And the aliens are obviously the villains, and it's all about humans discovering aliens and being haunted or realizing how unsafe they are and everything. And Lovecraft was he was living in like the 20s America and terrified of immigrants and people who weren't white. And so when he was writing these stories, to him it was a metaphor of people who weren't speaking English or walking down the street and seeing someone who's mixed race. He was writing about humans reproducing with aliens, and so it's horrible stuff. But it's so enduring to the modern audience because if you don't read it that way, it speaks to the general human condition. But so I want to go back to the original stuff and write stories that invert that and make it about fighting racism. Maybe the aliens are the white people who don't want to accept anyone into their country, stuff like that.
So how does it appeal? You're trying to appeal to the same audience, though, right? So it appeals to them because it's the same universe, but both from
right. It's kind of a bait and switch. It's kind of a crazy thing that could go horribly. Because I'm hoping fans of the game will follow me and want to play the next ones, and then hopefully be shocked, maybe learn something. So there's a big balance there. It's how far you take it in terms of being subversive and calling out Lovecraft. People are very defensive of Lovecraft. Yeah.
And sorry, can you explain they don't like it when you mess with the canon, but you're kind of going way off canon. So
Right. Okay.
Is that, so that's okay.
So what I experienced with the Whisper in Darkness is there's a sort of a hardcore group of Lovecraft fans that's all about the language and the English of it, the way it was written, and really isn't comfortable with the concept of like a visual or a video game of Lovecraft like at all, because it's about unimaginable cosmic things, and they think you can't draw that. That's gonna suck. So you have people like that. You have like the one person who commented on my YouTube trailer saying, with a quote from my devlog saying, "Oh, he made the main character gender neutral. F this SJW." You know. I think the people who were leaving positive reviews on my game, and most of the people who were playing it, I think what I did to subvert Lovecraft the first time around was subtle enough that they either didn't notice or they were okay with it. And now I'm pushing the envelope because, yeah. Is there any other questions? Am I going too long on a tangent of this?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I think absolutely one of the necessary things if you want to shake up the game industry, get noticed, is like go outside. And I mean outside of like your regular inspirations, the things that all of your friends do and play, and like experience weird things that you find somewhere in like a used bookstore, or listen to people's remixes on SoundCloud. Like find things that no one else has experienced, and then wrap that into your work, so that when you go into a brainstorm and share your ideas, you're stealing everything, and you'll know that, but everyone else will think you're like Picasso, just spewing, genius. That's pretentious. But, so I love comic books. There's an amazing world of indie comic books, and I also have found that the mainstream of comic books is more developed, I would say, than the mainstream of video games. That's just my opinion. So I recommend comics, I recommend film. We have the Salt Lake Film Society in Utah, and it's like $5 a month to get unlimited DVD rentals. So last summer I was watching like every classic horror film, submerging myself in that, and it colored the way I made The Whisper in Darkness in ways that I wouldn't be able to explain. And the reason this is such an advantage, a competitive edge for you as a designer or a writer, anything like that, is like video games are really, really insular, right? We've all experienced this because we love games so much, and games are kind of a culture of being outcast from the regular social world, and so you go with your friends to the arcade or play Call of Duty and stuff like that, and that's where you get your acceptance, which is a great, powerful thing. But what it gives us is an industry of people with the same ideas. Right? Does anyone disagree? Is this one of the contentious points? Because it's kind of like to a certain extent thing. Like this isn't. I can't just say everyone's boring in games, but that's kind of what I'm saying. So.
Well, if you're trying to branch out into an entirely new industry, farm simulators, there's a risk that's not very well developed, or that no one will know to look for your game. How do you make sure that you are mainstream enough that it qualifies as a game? Yeah.
That's a tough one. So this, I'm talking about, your inspirations.
Okay.
Not necessarily that you should be making film or writing comics, although that's also an opportunity, but I think you should be networking with like the people at the comic shop who work there, or talking to writers who write short stories or poetry or whatever, and share your ideas with them, show your games to them, and get that cross-pollination into your work. And your work could still be a super mainstream game, whatever genre you're already working in. You give it more flavor, maybe a different setting, maybe more personality in the writing, and that's what comes from. Does that make sense? And we can talk about the balance between, where to put your own game, but that's a whole huge thing. Tyler?
I was just gonna say, I think the spirit of indie is that we're experimenting, pushing boundaries, trying to do something that's not the next Call of Duty, right? And so I think taking the inspiration but also pushing the boundaries are great. But as you spike out little demos and tests and share it, like at nights like this, you find out whether or not there's an audience for it. Right. I think that's something that we have to be, as indies, we have to be willing to do, is to try something that's a risk, but then willing to let it go when it doesn't work out.
So that kind of focuses my thoughts on the Whisper of Darkness, and this kind of answers the other part of your question. Is when I made it, I didn't know I was making a visual novel. Like, the phrase walking simulator hadn't been invented. That's what my game is. But I kind of thought I was doing my own original thing. I was like, I'm just going to do it with paintings. That way I can use my artist friend can just do all the art, and we don't need animations. It'll be cheap and it'll be fast, and I can write it. I was not inventing a genre, although, in my own head I was. So I made the whole thing in a game jam out of passion and experimentation with no concept of whether there would be an audience. Then I shared it with people and found that reaction. And it had only taken 7 days to make that prototype. And then that was the signal that this is something that can keep going. So I think that's another crucial thing. It's like, make your game fast. Start with a prototype that gets at the core of what you want to make, and then show it to people really, really as early as possible. And then the other thing is, if I made a game that was like a monthly, options of different media that you could choose, like here's the month's episode of TV or movie, like one movie a month or whatever that you could choose, and then interact in the community and get recommendations and stuff. Is anyone interested in that kind of a thing?
Say that again.
Trying to figure out what that was.
So my idea is basically that it's overwhelming. Like, I'm telling you to get involved in comic books and film, and those are all as crazy and intricate as video games. So it's like that right off the bat could be discouraging enough that you're just like, I don't know where to start. But if someone was putting out a monthly post that said, here's the best, most interesting comic book that just came out, if you want to try it. And here's a few things to know, recommendations, something like that.
Talking about sources of inspiration,
Yeah.
Sharing with each other sources of inspiration.
I kind of do that. On a project by project basis, because depending on what project I'm working on, something may be more valuable to me in terms of inspiration than whatever's recommended that month.
Mm-hmm.
What I think would be cool is if there was a monthly thing that said, okay, here's something that I found inspiration from, and here's how it applies to indie development. That sounds more interesting to me than just here's a recommendation.
Okay.
But that's just.
I guess what I'm pitching is kind of like a book club, but for everything. But yeah, this is just an idea. So the next main point is we need to make our games faster. And big caveat here is if you love making custom engines, you should do it. If you like it more than making games, just make an engine. But I think if you buy into the kind of things I'm saying, you should be working in Unity or Twine or Pico 8. Who here has never heard of Pico 8? Go look it up. It's amazing. I think it's one of the best things to happen to gaming since Unity. And okay, here's another talk that I recommend. Catt Small is the organizer of the Game Devs of Color conference. She's really awesome. And I'll put up links to all of this stuff. But I found that she has a lot of helpful stuff about how to manage Git repos when you're on a team and you need to move quickly without overriding each other's work and have good communication, stuff like that. That's all. Glorious Trainwrecks is kind of like Ludum Dare, but it's always going and shorter than 48 hours. It's people are constantly okay, here's the thing that I just made in 2 hours in Twine. Tell me what you think about it. And it just has this ethos of let's make glorious train wrecks. It doesn't matter if it's buggy, if it's broken, if you can't even play it. Put it out there, get the experiment done, So I'm planning on getting more involved in that community. And I'll let you know. Yeah, so Steam Direct is out now, which means no more green light. All you have to do to get on Steam is pay $100 and then put together the store page, your screenshots, your trailer, whatever, and then you can ship. So that's like no barrier to entry. Anyone in here can do that. You know, go around and ask 10 people for $10 who are your friends. You know, tell them it's for something else.
Is that so? If that $100 is that a one-time thing as a developer, or is that per game per project?
It's per game. It used to be a one-time thing, but this is still way better because in the past it was $100 up front, and then every game had to go through Greenlight. You would never know how long Greenlight's going to take, and you would need a good trailer. There's a lot of randomness going on, and when people see your game, do they like it? Do you get enough comments? What is the algorithm? No one ever knew what the algorithm was or what was required to get through Greenlight. This is way better, and you can also earn back the $100. And they've released exact numbers on how much gross revenue you need to earn back your $100, and the Whisper in Darkness would have if it had been through Steam Direct. So it's really attainable. I don't believe what I'm saying at the top, but the point is things are changing, and we need to adapt. It's like a really great opportunity to be thinking about, total overhaul of the way we make games and do our work. That's pretentious. We have in the local community, we have these 3 resources that will help you. You have to be under NDA, so I have not included any details here. But the NDA, all you would have to do is pay the $100 and submit your game, and then we'll invite you into all of these things. Just get in touch. We have a channel on the Slack. Who here is not on the Slack? You should get on the Slack. So we'll hook you up with that. Okay, so talking about how we're going to re-energize the Utah game scene, we need to be talking about other ways of making money and supporting ourselves while we make our games so that we can be more creative and more stable, because you can't just be poor all the time or give up on food to go full-time indie. You need money and stability and health before you could do anything creative. So, what are some ways we can make that happen? When I say capitalism sucks, I don't say that in a way to offend anyone or make a political statement. I'm talking about tangible drawbacks of making your games to sell directly to players, self-publishing, reasons why that is negative and gets in the way of your creative output. It's been said by other indies that when you are releasing your games commercially, success from one game needs to be so big and earn enough money to pay for 9 failures because of just how you can never count on succeeding, and whenever you release, it's actually more logical to count on a failure. So if you want to sustain yourself in a hit-based market, your one game needs to pay for 9. And that is terrifying. So, let's start looking at other ways we can do this. It's important to note that art was not always sold in an open market and created that way. There are other ways to survive, and there's other ways art's been funded through the ages. And I'm not saying that you're going to find a king to pay you to make a statue of him or a giant tower in his honor, but maybe we can learn certain things from the past that can be applied in novel ways, like Patreon. Kickstarter and Indiegogo, these platforms are trying to emulate from the form of patronage where you weren't necessarily beholden to the free market. You're beholden to a group of people who supports your work and wants to see it made. So we have examples of people like Henry Smith, who developed Space Team, now has a Patreon and ran a Kickstarter
to test the model where all of his games are completely free and funded by supporters and fans who love his work, because he wants to put all of his focus on making the best games, the weirdest games, and he can't do that if he's relying on selling them. And there's other examples of, there are even a lot of artists who've managed to go full-time careers based on Patreon. So it's something you should look into. It's something I've been trying. And yeah, I'll link to a few resources in the description. And when I mention local spirit, what I'm talking about is it's really hard to market your game in the global market or even the national market on Steam when there are so many competitors, and if you set out to make the next great indie platformer, you are, I'm just going to say it, you're not going to make the best indie platformer, and you probably won't succeed and sell enough copies to survive. What if you weren't competing with every one of the best game developers in the whole planet, but instead you were making a game that you would market specifically to people in your city or your state? Base it in locations in your community. Instead of spending money on background art and character art, do a collage style, take photos and use those as the assets in your game. Record sounds locally. I included a picture of an arcade because I recently learned that there's an organization trying to build a video game museum in Utah, and they're funding that by putting old arcade machines up in places like Watchtower Cafe and collecting money from them. So why aren't we making arcade games and putting up cabinets, doing things like that enrich local spaces and build connections where that might get you someone might get you a partnership with a place, or more like commissions to make games like Robert Yang is talking about. We're also talking about making games that appeal to everyone, not just gamers. Gamers are it's not a small audience, but it's much more limited than when you're talking about making things that appeal to the general population. Why put so much work into game mechanics and balance and game feel and things like that when just by doing that you're already alienating so much of the population? There's an article by Robert Yang, who's a professor at NYU, where he discusses several different possibilities for how games could be funded, and some of them have real-world examples that have already happened, that have been done, and we can look at. So, here's a quote from his article, which I'll also link in the description. What if we take games, but reframe them in other terms with other values? What if couples commission games for weddings? Or what if communities built games to celebrate their histories? What if games were a form of journalism? I think the first step towards making these games happen is imagining how they can happen. So here's a bunch of possible game developer futures. Clearly you should read the whole article. I highly recommend it.
Okay, so yeah, video games already are a form of journalism. There's been a whole book written about that. It's called News Games. And it's a great book. I haven't read the whole thing. It's sitting on my shelf. But people have made games that systematize like Somali pirates and the economics of what they do. So you play as a pirate, but you learn why pirates exist, what the government does about pirates, what's going through a pirate's head. It's really interesting, and they got paid to make that by Wired. Commissioned to do it, which is kind of like the concept of having a patron or a king back your thing. If you are paid to do the project and not by a market, that's a really nice thing. Then we also have episodic games, and this is an interesting example, I think, of episodic games where they do a monthly or a 3-monthly subscription. You choose how much to pay and then how many months, whatever, and they're just releasing like an episode every week of like a little two-choice choose-your-own-adventure game that gives you the story. It's on your phone, the next passage of text, and then you pick one thing out of 2 things, and it gives you more story. and they're pretty fun. I like them. I got bored of them, but if they're succeeding doing that, that's pretty cool, right? Because they have their engine done. All they're doing is like writing, and writing is simple, and you can pay someone to write for you and stuff like that. So they're shipping fast, which is one of the things I'm trying to push. Anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns? All right. So this is my take on Robert Yang being commissioned for a wedding. And there are examples of things that are happening like this already, like New York, the NYU Game Center has an annual fighting game party where they commission a team to make a brand new fighting game. All of the games that have been made in the past are amazing. And they throw a party in New York, and everybody in the New York scene comes and plays it, and they're the first people who get to play the game. That's the debut of the game. If you played Nidhogg, that's where that came from. So what if we just, make that our profession? Like, VR headsets are expensive, the hardware is expensive, so your market is really limited. What if you are being, making the theme of whatever someone's birthday party is? If someone wants to have a princess birthday party, you make that VR game and bring it with a headset and help the kids through it and get paid to do that. Right? It's so crazy, it just might work.
Being a magician in the past, when I just went to college, it was kind of interesting. Just bring back memories.
We have a magician in the audience?
Yeah, I haven't for college.
That's so awesome. Were you in the Alliance?
No.
Okay. Okay, this is a big one. It's kind of has nothing to do with it has everything to do with every other slide in the talk is what I should say. We have resources in the community, so like therapy and prescriptions, psychiatry, those things are expensive, but like everybody has these problems and nobody talks about them, and it affects like every aspect of your creative output. So we have a channel in the Slack. This one's not private. You don't need to sign an NDA. You can talk about your feels, and we'll help you through your feels and give you advice and hugs and everything, all on the interwebs. This, I think, is really important. Okay. So here's a few media things that I think really play to the point I have. Not just getting inspiration from outside of video games, but like live a crazy life, have memorable experiences, meet crazy people.
Get naked.
Get naked. Yeah. Has anyone seen The Overnight? It's an amazing, amazing movie. It's like an hour and a half or 2.5 hours of just two families having a double date and just like slowly getting naked. It's hilarious. And it's actually artistic. It's not, it's not porn. It has a great dialogue, well written. And Fight Club is all about, shaking off the dreariness of your life and just going and like taking off your shirt and just fighting people. Like, we're not going to do that, right? I hope no one here is going to do that. But you can do something like that. Like, I really recommend dance classes. They've changed my life. And I've met awesome people, like people who you're never going to meet in the game industry, all in one room. Like, so many people who will just open up, like, totally different avenues of your life. Like, start going to concerts, discover new bands, make new friends, stop and smell the roses. Has anyone ever shot the tube? This is a local thing. This only applies in Utah. So it's in Mill Creek by Suicide Rock. There's this pipe that water flows through, and it's an institution that's developed around this where there's always someone up there plugging up the pipe with road signs or, whatever, and building a dam. There's a picture of it. And then the water builds and builds and builds, and you bring inner tubes or a raft or anything, and you sit in it, and then you let the dam go, and then it pushes you down. It's like a water slide that's free and more dangerous. Like, you can cut your feet at the bottom. Crazy stuff. Like, and that's like where we live. That's nowhere else. take advantage of things like that, get naked, take a trip, take advantage of places like New York, go to museums. Really important one is, I am biased. I kind of thought everyone already knew about this, but it seems like no one does. There's a weekly class. It's not going on right now, but this whole past year there was a weekly volunteer-taught class for refugees to learn Unity and game design. Stephen and Tyler helped with that. Is anyone else here who helped with that? Come join us. Like, you don't need to have a lot of skill to make a big impact in that class. Like, I learned Unity so that I could go and start teaching. I had only done the first tutorial, and I was able to help people debug and figure things out, and then I learned Unity going along doing that. So that's an opportunity that I think is amazing.
Now, why does this slide exist? What's the purpose of doing these things? Why should I take a dance class? Are you saying do it because, or do it because I'll make better games, or do it because it improves my mental health, or something else?
All of the above.
I think that's implying a lot.
I think the best possible answer to that is that if you do these things, you will know why. Hopefully, you'll feel it. Is that a satisfactory answer?
Pretty good answer.
Yeah.
If you do them, then you'll know why you should do them.
Yeah.
All right.
Like, here's a crazy one, and I haven't done this in a long time. Like, when I was 12 and I was home alone, like everyone out of the house, I would actually like walk around the house naked. It's like so much adrenaline, because like if someone sees you or someone comes home early, and it's like, who knows what that did to my psyche, and now that's going to be part of my writing and my games. And like, you know, do stuff like that. You know, pick your nose. Like, there's nothing that says you can't do these things. Unless you're in public.
Except for the law, yeah, right. And getting arrested and labeled as a sex offender. But other than that,
you should be in the privacy of your home with the shutters closed and, you know, stuff like that. Or be 12, because nothing can happen to you when you're 12. But yeah, this is my indulgent slide that maybe is tangential to all of it, but I couldn't get this talk without this slide. I think another crucial thing of making fast and making interesting things is that you be having fun the whole time. And one of the ways of doing that is understanding how much of life can be a game if you just change the way you think about it. So there's this really interesting book by Ian Bogost. You've probably heard of him, or if you haven't, you probably read something of his and you don't know it. But his whole theory is basically that like you can make a game anywhere in your life just by setting constraints and working within those and learning the way systems interact and just being playful. Like, a game is any situation where you're being playful. Like, this talk is a game to me because I'm bouncing off of everyone and coming up with ideas on the spot. You know, and I think it makes for a happier life. Habitica is a really cool thing, and this also is a good mental health thing. Both as a community and as a tool. You basically set up your to-do list, your regular, like, do the laundry every Saturday or whatever. You put all of that in there, and then when you do those things, you have a character who levels up, gets dragons as a pet, find cool items and stuff. And it gamifies your life in a way where when you're feeling no motivation, and, you know, if you don't, like, this might just be a depression thing, and it might be an everyone thing, but there are some times when we know we love making games and we have fun doing it, but it's just not there. Something is not giving us that in that moment. Habitica, for me, has just made, you know, like, it's really a Skinner box kind of psychological manipulative thing, but it's like, I just want those coins, and that's worth enough to me that I'm going to clean the bathroom even though I don't feel anything right now. So that's kind of a heavy thing. So also by Ian Bogost is an article called Gamification is Bullshit, where he takes down the whole concept and argues about the psychological manipulation that I just talked about, saying that doesn't really help you, it's stupid, it doesn't work, the motivation wears off. These are all amazing points if you're a bullshit game designer. if you're a good game designer and take creative approaches to how can you make your workflow more playful and more interesting, you can end up with things that are really cool. So I just barely started this. I've been keeping my to-do list on sticky notes for a really long time. It's like you fill up a jar with sticky notes and then you feel awesome because you can hold it in your hand and see like this is a month of work, and I kept doing things the whole time. But you can put sticky notes on your screen and then you can't see things. Like when I need to put something in the trash, I have to like put that up there and then maybe rearrange it later. And that's really motivating to get to your to-do list when it's actually in the way of Facebook or homework or whatever. You just have to do it. And then you can, introduce a little bit of Tetris by letting yourself rearrange. The problem with sticky notes is if you never do anything, you're going to start to feel really bad, and you're not going to be able to see anything, and it's going to become a huge burden, give you anxiety, all those things. So make it like geometry boards and give yourself a power bomb where you just take all of them off and rip them up, and it doesn't matter. It's a blank slate. Try again, whatever, Is this an idea that resonates with anyone? This talk is a game. Preparing it was a game and a game jam at the same time because I was waiting for my flight back to Salt Lake and heard that they needed a talk, and I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. I have so many things going through my head. I want to give that talk, and I'm going to prep it by the time I land. I'm going to buy the onboard Wi-Fi, put it together on my iPad. I'll write everything in that little time window. It'll be a game jam. And then the onboard Wi-Fi was like $20, and I was like, okay, I'll do it later. I wrote a ton of notes. So this is not the first airplane jam presentation of Utah Unite. Someone else will have to do that later. That's I've probably gone a lot over, haven't I? Or maybe right about on the half-hour mark. So if you find me interesting, these are the things I'm working on. I post all of the updates in the Slack channel on dev blogs or whatever. So that's one way of finding all of it. You can take one of my cards. I just barely started every day making a Twine game, then putting them all together and releasing those. That's been something that's like helping me get my creative work out there quickly, learn Twine, actually practice things, creating an attitude where it's okay to make mistakes because you're just going to make another one tomorrow. Shameless self-promotion. If you want to buy me a cookie feed.
That's pretentious.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Has anyone kept counting their score?
I forgot.
5
points.
5?
5-ish.
We have 2 winners who both get
Pie.
nothing. All right. Yeah. Thanks.
All right.
Cool.